Welcome back to Good Morning Kenya. My name is Mike Migwi. This is The Viewpoint, where we talk about politics and everything in between. Today, there's a lot to talk about, but before that, my guests are already in studio. On my far left is Honorable Makali Mulu, MP Kitui Central. Karibu sana.
Hi, good morning, viewers.
And also Honorable Wilson Sosion, who is a former nominated MP. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, viewers.
And also Brian Oduor, who is a political analyst. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, viewers.
All right. Let's get the show on the road, and we do that by reading what is on the front page of our local dailies. Let me start with the Daily Nation. This is what is splashed on the front page of the Daily Nation. Ruto's state jobs shocker. Thousands of civil servants countrywide are staring at job losses as the cabinet yesterday approved plans to merge, restructure, dissolve or sell of government-owned firms in a bid to boost efficiency and service delivery while reducing costs and aligning with IMF budgetary support program. Some of the merged state corporations: University Fund, Higher Education Loans Board, Kenya Tourism Board, Tourism Research. It's tabulated on the front page of the Daily Nation. 189 teachers in scramble for 25,000 promotion posts. Tutors from across the country sending their application for 9,179 positions in post-primary schools and 16,109 slots in primary schools, as advertised by their employer recently. Let me start with you, Mheshimiwa Makali. The idea of doing away with some of the state corporation and merging others, is this a welcome move in a bid to boost efficiency, according to you?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mike, for hosting us. I think the issue of parastatals in this country is an issue which has been discussed many, many times. And a lot of researchers, a lot of people who have done serious analysis have come up with a conclusion that there is need to restructure and reorganize, and even to an extent merge some. And this has come up as a result of analyzing the roles. It has been confirmed that there is a lot of duplication of roles in some of these parastatals. And if we want to improve efficiency, then automatically it's important that we get to have some either disappearing from the scene, because what they are doing can easily be done by other parastatals or other government agencies and be done in a more efficient manner. The second point, which has been important in justifying this move, is the fact that when you look at their budgets and the way they conduct their business, there are lots of what I would call, I don't want to call misuse, but a lot of them are not using money in a most effective manner, so that at the end of the day, Kenyans get value for money. And that's why when you look at it, I think there's also another report which is indicating that as at yesterday,
yes,
there were about, in terms of pending bills, the totality of all the parastatals, they hold different individuals and organizations about 94 billion, which is a lot of money. So looking at all these factors, and also with the pressure from World Bank and IMF, you know, there's that pressure, you can't rule it out because it has always been there. I think from where I sit, it is a move towards the right direction. But the question I would want to put to all this process is that we need to carry this in a very, very structured manner and in a very organized way, so that we don't, because what is likely to happen as a result of this restructuring, if we don't do it well, 3 or 4 things could happen. The first thing is that there could be loss of jobs, as you put.
Yes.
And you know, where we are as Kenyans now, unemployment is such a high, it's so high and a problem to Kenyans that if now any Kenyan loses job at this point,
yeah,
it is very bad to them and also to their families. The second thing is, if not properly managed, we could easily end up with marginalization. You know, some of these parastatals, if you look at the way even geographical locations and all that, some are in places which are actually like affirmative action. And if you just reorganize them without taking without really factoring, without considering the fact that some are addressing some very unique needs. For example, those ones which are found in the arid and semi-arid areas. Then you could easily marginalize those areas further. The other problem which is likely to happen, if the process is not managed well, you could have also people claiming to be victimized. Because, for example, if you have parastatal 1, A, B, 3 or 4, and then you dissolve mine, you merge another 2, you know, each one of them has a CEO and the top management, and there's a board. So immediately you dissolve or merge, it means automatically the top officials, some will lose their jobs, others, the board members will also lose their positions. And you know, Kenya is a country where when anything happens, people get to analyze the details in terms of where do we have that CEO coming from? Yeah. Who are the board members there? So you could also have those elements saying we have been victimized. And I think to me, this is what we are saying, the move is the correct move, but can we manage the process in a way that we are also fair to the process? Managing the process. Yes.
Honorable Sosion, one of the state corporations that is being merged is University Fund together with the Higher Education Loans Board. I want to get your views on that, and also what Mheshimiwa has said about managing the process.
Now, you know, in our governance system, and the first question we ask is that how are these several parastatals created with similar roles? If you look at University Fund Board and you look at Higher Education Loans Board, both of them are streaming revenues to the universities. So basically, they're doing one and the same thing.
Duplication.
And yes, duplication, which creates conflicts, which create confusion, and the sufferers in most cases are the end users of the products from these parastatals. I think what the cabinet decided is to make government, in terms of parastatals, lean and efficient. Efficiency is the key thing here. You reduce wastage. I don't think you create parastatals to create jobs. Yeah. It's a very bad theory that you think you are creating jobs by creating parastatals so that you create positions of board members. You create I don't think that is economically plausible. And we must bite the bullet in taking these actions so that then we ensure that this efficiency and transparency in government delivery of services. So that then eventually we strengthen our governance system, and the underpinning principle of Kenya Kwanza administration is to revive the economy and to strengthen the production sector. And once that is done, then you can create jobs. We must develop a reasonable governance system that creates a good ecosystem of creating jobs for all, but not jobs for some. We must be a country, we can't be a country of creating jobs for some selected few. Let us have an ecosystem that creates jobs for everyone. And that should be the philosophy. So I think in terms of correcting the mistakes of the past, and of course we cannot fear that the consequences will affect A, B, C, D. There are always transitions in transitional provisions so that you don't affect the workers working within those entities. And it doesn't mean merging is laying off workers. The number of workers who have been working in those entities, because we can go on and on. Look at the Tourist Improvement Fund and Tourism Development Fund. More or less the same thing. And therefore, matching and ensuring that the structures of accountability and delivery is key. So it's important to have a lean and efficient government that delivers better to the people and which speaks to the aspiration of Kenyans.
All right. Brian, it's about enhancing efficiency and service delivery and also aligning with IMF budgetary support programs. What's your take on that?
First and foremost, Bwana Mark, thank you. I'd like to state I totally disagree. I totally disagree with my friends over here, especially when it comes to job safety. You can't fire people and claim the reason for firing those people is so that the economy can be strong. I mean, it's some crazy oxymoron. To be realistic, anytime you hear IMF, World Bank, those tones, nothing good follows later. We can remember last year, before they were, the country, the government was about to pass the Finance Act. You remember what was the pressure? The pressure was from World Bank and Finance Bill. Now we are the people who are in Kenya right now. At this opportune time, you can't fire me from my job and tell me it is going to help create a better, strong economy. There is only one way to create a better, strong economy in a deficit economy. Kenya is a deficit economy, meaning that we borrow and we use more than we make. And the only way to strengthen a deficit economy is to use the funds that you've borrowed to expand the tax base by building infrastructure and let the people that you tax increase in number. Otherwise, what this government's constant approach is always to reduce the amount of people that they can tax. And then that falls on this face. Everything goes, I don't know, this is crazy, sir, for lack of a better word.
But then again, Mheshimiwa Makali, isn't that one of the hardest decisions, so to speak, that we have to make as a country?
You know, the thing is, as I said earlier, the people we are discussing today are people in post. They are already working. They are not people who are going to be employed as a result of what is happening. So the only thing which will happen automatically is by merging or dissolution, some people will lose their jobs. Now, if we are to analyze the impact of people losing a job, more likely will have more serious negative impact in terms of tax collection, in terms of disposable income to the families, in terms of spending so that you increase aggregate demand. But what we are saying is to increase efficiency, then there are things you must do. Because as Honorable Sosiano is saying, in a situation where you have one role, for example, the role of funding university education, being done by 3 parastatals, and at the end of the day it's just funding university education, then you must ask yourself, are we really getting value for money by having 3 institutions doing this one function? And if the answer is no, if you're not getting value for money, it means then if we are to merge them to become only one, more automatically we'll be saving money. So the question is, the money we are saving as a result of merging these 3 parastatals, is it money then you would say can easily accommodate the loss in terms of job loss, the loss in terms of the functions that were being done by these 2 which have been merged, the loss in terms of some board members and CEOs, because they're already in post, being now declared redundant. And if we do that, then we can say in total, by doing the move the cabinet has done, I'm imagining at some point, either Treasury or somebody else will be able to say, by merging parastatals or through that dissolution, the country has saved this kind of money in terms of resources, so that these resources could then easily be used for other productive activities. The other important thing is they could say the people who are going to lose their jobs from the parastatals, then can we think of a way of then maybe observing them in the main public service stream, so that in that case they don't really lose their jobs, but it's a matter of transfer of services from a parastatal to the public service. And by all standards, when you look at the public service currently, we have been having this challenge where we have the top, which is old people, and you have very young people at the entry level. In the middle level, there has always been serious gaps. So maybe this now provides the government the chance to push this, because they are already public servants, to push them from parastatals to the mainstream. But the question, and I think this is now the difficult question, I'm sure cabinet must have been advised through this.
Yes.
You find most people work in the parastatals in terms of their pay rate, the pay scale. Their pay scale is always higher than the mainstream public service. So more likely we find if we are to transfer them with the same pay scale, then automatically they'll be very high also. They'll go to the top again, and still the middle will not be addressed. So these are the tough questions. But I imagine somebody must have sat, looked at all this process, so that at the end of the day, whatever is going to be done is for the benefit of the country, but at the same time taking care of people who might lose their jobs, and people then, instead of worsening the situation, so that we have what I call a delicate balancing in terms of merging, but at the same time ensure that you don't disadvantage a lot of people as a result of that. Yes.
Mheshimiwa Session, okay, as you add on that, you have also to agree that this also, in a way, eases the fiscal burden on government in terms of the funds allocated to these parastatals.
Well, in terms of government wastage and misuse of money from the exchequer, I think it's real. There's a lot of wastage, and is directed. You are directing to 3 parastatals who will still do the same thing. I want us to understand what we call merging. Merging is you don't walk in and lay off workers. That is not the idea. There are always structural processes that are guided by law, including the safety of workers. And of course, if you look at the workforce and the work role, the role of workers, the top tier workers and the bottom tier workers. And in most of these, those who get affected are always the top tier, because we cannot have 2 MDs. So 1 MD must go off. But the lower cadre workers are not affected. And those are the most vulnerable in this case. The rest are could be privileged or board members. So the number of board members would reduce. So I think in terms of decisions, it's decisions that must be taken. Because the architecture in which, as Makale Bunle has explained, the architecture in which these parastatals were established, when you look at it even in terms of wastage, in terms of earnings by the top tier, it's completely moral. And you wonder why do you create 3-4 parastatals that are doing almost similar work? Why can't you match them? And then you coordinate better from a central point, and without necessarily majority of the workers within the institutions losing their jobs. So I think, according to me, it's a prudent thing to make. You see, the problem with Kenya sometimes is that in management, we take a lot of time in making good proposals, but we don't take the bold step to implement. Let us implement and deal with the consequences that arise from the implementation, while at the same time securing the jobs of the most vulnerable within the parastatals. I'm sure that is what has been considered.
Yes.
Because, of course, you know, the Attorney General sits in the cabinet and is able to advise on the legal implications, the job losses, the compensations, and all that. So we don't need to worry very much. Let us worry about the post-matcha, the efficiency that will result in, and of course, we are a deficit economy. That's a fact, for example, until we successfully take off various aspects of production, and we have an economy that is able to incubate production programs within itself, we will not yet be out of the woods. So we cannot have the luxury of also engaging in further wastage and creating so many institutions of duplication. It was a bad idea from the beginning. It was a wrong approach to governance.
Do you agree with
Let us have our governance
I want
right.
to know, at what point did we now wake up and realize that these chosen parastatals, there's some redundancy? We just woke up. This is like they fell from heaven. We planned this thing and we put them. Let us call this thing as it is. As long as you hear IMF, World Bank, this is an austerity measure. Let's stop hiding behind things. This is an austerity measure. So my friends here, for lack of a better word, are lying, telling us that somehow this austerity measure will lead to the preservation of jobs. While austerity measures, you understand the nature of austerity measures is that the government needs to reduce its spending.
Actually, the Union of Kenya Civil Servants Secretary General Tom Odege responded by saying, be mindful of the job cuts and caution
Yes,
against,
yes. This anytime you hear IMF, you understand this. Call it by another name. But if it smells like a rose, it looks like a rose, it is a rose. This is an austerity measure. So as long as it's an austerity measure, we cannot purport or pretend that it's not, that is streamlining. No, what are they streamlining? For all these years, they were not, no. Let's be sincere with our people. Let's be sincere with the facts on the ground. This is an austerity measure, and people are going to lose their jobs. I am against it 110%. All these reasons they're giving are neither here or there. You see, Bwana Sossion is telling us that that are affected, but the watu wa mkono, they don't get affected. What is that now? How can you even prove that?
How can you disapprove? How can
You know, let's be serious.
you look so serious with your reasoning.
All right, we are going to let's take a breather. Let's take a breather.
Don't criticize for the sake of criticize with facts.
Let's take a breather and come back and continue with the viewpoint. Welcome back to Good Morning Kenya. This is The Viewpoint. We continue with what is making headlines in our local dailies. And the same story that is captured on the Daily Nation is the same that is captured on the front page of the Star. 16 parastatals axed in Ruto austerity plan. Cabinet approves the merger of 42 parastatals into 20 to boost of efficiency. Let me say we are also joined by Wakili George Kithi, who is an advocate of the High Court. And welcome to the program, sir. And I also want to get your sentiments on these two headlines. Ruto state jobs shocker and 16 parastatals axed in Ruto's austerity measures. What is your take on that? And in terms of job losses, how is that going to pan out?
Thank you. My take would be that I think it's more about the style of leadership of the CEO of the country. I've watched at President Ruto more in comparative analysis with former President Mwai Kibaki. President William Ruto is a centralist. He's a centralist because he centralizes power to a pool where he has more control. Whereas President Kibaki decentralized lots of those powers. Whereas the Constitution today decentralized lots of the powers to units, devolved units, commissions, and other structures created within law, President Ruto's basically definitively, in the sum total of his leadership, centralized everything, because he exerts more control compared to other presidents, especially if we look at Mwai Kibaki. And he seems to have a grip, or wants to have a grip of every affair of the country. And therefore he directs what to do, where and when. So he participates in lots of decision making, all the decisions making, and is very directional in on where the country goes. That's where you realize he has a very closer interaction with the decisions of the country. He has lots of interaction with the people. In the process of friction, he therefore has the fight at the doorsteps of the people of Kenya, and whoever it is, he will have the friction at a personal level. And there's no level of gap where he can interfere from probably a distance, so that it is his officers or certain officialdom that has participated in that decision making. Yeah. Whereas you would see Waziri Michuki, you will see many other ministers making decisions for and on behalf of the country, but seem to drive policy during the regime of Mwai Kibaki. A centralist, therefore, has one folly, being that every mistake that is made, he undertakes greater responsibility in the eyes of the public. Whereas a decentralized leader in any organization will have the liberty to communicate, change, reason within the context of anything that is taken that has a mistake. When you're a centralist, you therefore implement policy within the context of what you're thinking and what you're beholden to. Now, the control here, probably the subject of the control is to take up decisions that others, if given permission, will have done it differently. For instance, Mwai Kibaki had a good government in terms of the economics of it, yet did not merge these parastatals. Uhuru Kenyatta largely had friction with the public, but it was on other things other than probably the extent of the decibels we hear today with the current president. Now, this decision is not necessarily the solution for Kenyan problems. It's definitely not. It is a decision that saves a small percentage by way of theorizing it to probably austerically reduce government expenditures here and there. It is not even multiplying anything. It's simply reducing expenses, or meant to reduce expenses. That is very good. But obviously, if you're making more and you can ignore the little expense that is expendable on account of the structure now, then you don't have to reduce anything. It means, therefore, you're not making much more to cover that. So if it's an expense that you're doing away with, it means you are not making much money to be able to sustain that expense. In effect, therefore, it means you're not doing well. So when we come to government and start cutting government expenditure, ordinarily we look at trips, we look at tea, we look at small things that can be expended. But when we come to reducing government on account of parastatals, for instance, that are functional, have been functional, but we say that is collapsing them for austerity, I think it's because we do not make as much money as we used to, because then when we were making the money, we were sustaining them, but now we can't sustain them. Are these parastatals important? Yes, they are. I will tell you they are, because I've served in some of them, all right? And when we were there, they brought development and milestones to the community. Some of them are very close to the community. And you see, the government up there is very large in terms of how it's organized. But the little fiefdoms that are created in order to have a specialized meaning to certain sectors, for instance, fishing, which I believe affects people from the coast more and people from the lake region. Issues like tourism, that's sectorial. You can't put tourism in a pool with other development sectors in the country on account of the fact that it has its own issues. You wouldn't discuss tourism, for instance, in Malindi, which is dead today, and Lamu, in the context of development or the general development of the country. It is sectorial. And therefore, you have to have a unit dedicated to such. And that's how it is in government. For instance, we will have water, we will have land, we will have the air. Those will have very different authorities to be able to manage them. I think collapsing this may be a good thing, but generally and economically, it doesn't make much sense. It's probably the centralist approach to things.
Honorable Makali, do you agree with what Wakili has said, a centralist approach to this? And does it solve Kenyan problems?
I think its analysis in terms of the leadership we have been centralist. That's what I agree. But there are some statements he has made which I don't agree. And basically it's because when you look at the parastatals, it's important we realize that we have about 3 categories of parastatals. There are parastatals which are actually supposed to be investing to make money for government. There are parastatals which are regulatory, to make sure that the economy is regulated, like the insurance authority, things like KRA, things like pension, the retirement authority. Those are regulatory to make sure that things work as expected. And there are parastatals which serve social and cultural issues. Now, the ones for social and cultural and the ones for regulatory do not make money. So it is the work of the exchequer to fund them, because the functions they are doing for this country are important functions. So what we are saying, when you look at parastatals which are supposed to be making money for this country, so that at the end of the day, they are supposed to be giving dividends to the government, because there is an investment entity. Those are the ones we are saying we have analyzed them, and from where I sit, because I'm a budget expert, I can tell you for sure, some parastatals are not helping this country in terms of adding value. And time has come, whether an IMF is there or not there, for them to disappear from the face. Because they have become an agent of draining resources from the exchequer. Better things can help. To me earlier, the issue is not people losing job. The issue is how do you manage the process? We must manage the process in a way that you manage the 3 things I mentioned. One of them, job loss, so that even as you merge, dissolve, or do whatever you want to do with them, people don't lose the jobs. The second one I talked about marginalization.
Yes.
When you look at this country, there are some parastatals which are specifically created or to serve some very disadvantaged areas of this country. And then if you just dissolve them, it means then automatically you are likely to continue marginalizing those areas. That's why I said, even as you dissolve, factor in make sure that you don't marginalize Kenyans further by killing these parastatals. And the third one, I said a situation whereby our normal politics, day-to-day politics, we have been in this country, where people start saying, tumeonewa, watu wetu wamefutwa, watu wetu. So, you know, these stories are there.
Yes.
So that if you manage the process well, at the end of the day, we should be having a positive move for the country, not negative. But where we are now, and where I sit as person who has been, looks at all their budgets, because, you know, parastatals, we normally give them what we call one-line item budget. You just give them about, you can say 500 million, which is not itemized budget. So you see, unlike other budgets which are normally itemized that you can see where the money is going, their budget is just one line. And that's what we are saying. When you look at it in detail, you realize we're actually pumping much more money to parastatals than we are getting back as a country from them. More so, the ones which are investing.
I can see you want to add something.
I think I want to weigh in on the leadership styles that our learned council has stated. Of course, there are different styles of leadership. Yeah. Those who concentrate power, those who delegate power, that's a style of leadership. But I think a better description of President William Ruto is that he's able to make bold decisions. And those bold decisions are not friendly to those who have other interest within the ecosystem. This is Kenya, and we know that. And some of the bold decisions that other administrations fail to do so and must be taken, President William Ruto has done it. Look at, for example, the agriculture sector. Very bold to subsidize farmers to the extent that now fertilizers and other farm inputs, there is a good projection of good support for farmers, and farmers are able to work. And look at it for the first time. Look at the sugar industry. How did sugar industry collapse in this country? And lawyers know here, you protect these funny business cartels because that is business and they're protected. Someone who has never seen even sugarcane or grown sugarcane is supplying sugar to the Kenyan market and undermining the farmers. During Moi regime, we saw the sugar importation. That was deliberate to kill the local farmers. During Kibaki regime, it continued. It was never stopped. During Uru's regime, it continued. But in 2 years, we are now seeing sugarcane farmers reaping huge benefits, yield doubling. because of fertilizers, incentives, and other things. The factories are beginning to work. We are producing more sugar locally, and we are not importing anymore. And the Ministry of Agriculture cancelled importation licenses for sugar. That is a bold decision, because you must tell these cartels to ship out. And it's time we tell cartels to ship out. And those who are protecting cartels must also be told to go slow, so that you change the country. That is a bold decision of the president. And there are more intervention measures within that sector that will still come up. Look at housing. It remains still a very controversial thing, but let me tell you, turning around the human settlement in this country and repackaging it so that we move towards availing decent housing for all Kenyans and having a more organized settlement system is a key thing. Number three, I'm just citing a few things. UHC. How many countries have tried UHC? Ghana tried and it flopped because it over-relied on the business of the World Bank. But what we are doing here in Kenya is very monumental, and it will require resources. Those resources will come from the citizens. And we cannot have parastotals that are lying on money. You've heard how budgeting is done. You're given consolidated money, non-itemized money, and that money is just pocket money for people. And those are taxpayers' money. Okay. That money should be saved and directed towards critical services like healthcare and education.
All right.
I can go on and on the bold decision that the president has done. Okay. They may not be very friendly, but the benefits will fall in place and it will benefit the citizens of this
Brian,
country.
what is the leadership style?
You see...
Okay, I'll come to you. Let him respond to that. And as you answer that,
yes.
How should this be approached?
First and foremost, I'd like to address what Bonakiti said. Ruto's style of difference of ruling, of governing is that of centralizing. That's his style. That I have nothing to pick with. But we are speaking about these parastatals as if the people employed there are from Taiwan. These are Kenyans. Behind every title is a Kenyan with a family, with a family to look after. The skills that are going to be lost. And you're saying you want to save money. For who, if not for the Kenyans? You say you want to invest that money for the government. Now, the best investment is the people of the country. Am I lying?
I don't know that you are listening.
What do you mean you don't know whether
Because I said you can also have these employees joining the mainstream public service.
What you said, because I was noting it down, what you said is what I noted it down is that some parastatals do not serve as a good option for investment for the government, for the exchequer.
Yes.
Now, the best investment for the exchequer, my argument is that is the people, the citizenry itself. That is the number one investment. That is the best. That's what I'm differing with you. So when it comes to Bwana Sosion, most politicians, most people in the government, they like to bring out the boogeyman who's the cartel. And they talk about these cartels so boldly as if they know them. And if the cartels were real and they know them, then arrest them. You can't now be cowing and cowing people to doing your will, because now cartels, we have to fight these cartels. It's like, you remember when we were kids? Kula manite undertaker. You understand? We need to be sincere. We need to be
like one of them.
Thank you very much, sir. We need to be very sincere. We need to be very sincere. So the effects are wide and far-reaching. And what is happening is that the exchequer, who's the government of the day today, is getting pressure from IMF.
So my question to you was, how, from your perspective, should this be approached?
Well, we need to be more bold when dealing with the IMF. And when it comes to future generation and future leaderships, we need to understand and see the type of deals we make with these lenders. Up until recently, when we were having a scandal for Adani Airport, not many people knew these deals that were going on. But I believe, first and foremost, the people who made the deals with our lenders did very bad deals. If what has happened recently is anything to go by, first of all, that's the best way to approach it, is to make sure we have sober-minded individuals who will be there, like myself, who I'm willing to volunteer, to make sure we have good deals.
Okay. Be that as it may, Wakili, you wanted to
Yes,
contribute to that
I actually don't agree with Mr. Sosion and my good friend here. Of course, respectfully. Mr. Sosion says, if I heard him right, that, you see, President is a centralist. He agrees. He agrees.
No, I don't agree. It's not.
Well, you said you had nothing to comment on that. You didn't comment anyway. Number two, then he says he is bold. You know, you can be bold to suppress people. You can be bold to oppress people. That is also bold. You can also be bold to be friendly to people. But he says, I mean, the government is being unfriendly in the decisions making to its people. You have a duty to be friendly, especially in economics. The other issue is it is not true that sugar was not imported during this regime. It was. That's why we had a problem with Waziri of Agriculture the other day, and he went. In fact, he was the most unpopular president. Waziri. The third issue, which is important to note, is that, and basically it combines with what my good friend has said, government is not in the business of trading. Government should not trade with the people. You're supposed to facilitate an environment enabling trade to thrive. But you can't say we are closing this parastatal because it doesn't bring money to government. No. You are supposed to facilitate trade. Trade is for private sector. But at the inception, if you want, for instance, to activate a certain sector of the economy, you can start off banks, you can start off tourism institution. This government at independence, but they had hotels. It used to run hotels, the Pullmans of this world, Mombasa Beach, all that. Those were for government. And then you divest from that when the industry picks up. And therefore, you cannot say that government, you collapse because there's no money. That's not right. Then remember that government is to provide services. These services are sectoral. For instance, and for me, I still don't see the sense because I've not been explained.
So there's a direct impact on the way service delivery will
But of course, however,
done.
I don't think I haven't really got the explanation as to why one would say these services are a loss. So let's collapse the parastatals or the institution that gives the services and put them into mainstream ministries. If you're going to eradicate, remove those services, then it means there'll be no expense to it. But if the expense is particularized to a certain parastatal, but then those functions are moved to the ministry, and then the functions are still going to be, the services are still going to be provided by government. There's nothing you've done, because basically, you are still expensing the same service to the people. So what have you done? It's just in the name. Really, what's in a name? Because if it's cultural, if it's film, the film industry, for instance, if it's not working, then make it work. But if in the film industry and you have a state corporation, or on matters film or other matters, you transfer that function to the ministry, it is discharged by the ministry, people are going to discharge it, expenses, there'll be cars, there'll be probably an infrastructure to provide the service. What have you done? Really nothing. Because one is that there's a parastatal or a section of government that is specialized, and the other one is general within the ministry. But really, you're expensing an expense for purpose of the exchequer. And therefore, the derivative effect is that there isn't much you have done. I have asked a question, I've not been answered. Is it a solution to the problems of the economic situation of the country? And nobody has answered that, because we should be looking for a solution. Is that a solution? It is not. And obviously, if you say we are collapsing, and that's what they've said, that's what was decided. If you are collapsing parastatal for purpose of transferring the functions for austerity measures to mainstream government, really, you are not convincing us. And I want to repeat, if you're bold, be bold to be friendly to the people, and don't be bold to be unfriendly to the people.
There are other ways.
You know,
Yes.
you know, it's also good to be informed. And I think really, one of the things I see with my colleagues is the level of information, which is a bit wanting. Because the thing is, as I said earlier, and I want to repeat, in terms of parastatals, there is no parastatal in this country, which what it does in terms of function is not being done by a ministry. So you find that's why most of them are under PS and a minister, which means whatever they do is just being provided with a platform to do it more in a specialized area, because it's now standalone. And the problem we have, and which is being addressed, And at times I do things kind of saying, let's not mix everything politics in it. If you look at the parastatals, there are some which are duplicating roles and functions. And I think earlier you had mentioned, for example, the university funding. You have about 2 of them doing that.
The university fund.
If you look at the tourism, there are about 3 doing the same function. So what we're asking is, and that's why I'm saying it's important we be real as we debate here. In a situation where by merging them, you don't lose the functions being done, do you justify merging? That's the question. And that's what we were saying earlier, that if you merge the 3, you still achieve the same outcomes. Because what is key is outcomes. Now, once you achieve the same outcomes...
We are addressing losses that parastatals are making.
Let him make his point. Let him make his point.
Allow me to make my point.
I'll come to you.
So the thing is, the reason why you create a body, at the end of the day, you have very clear expected outcomes. Now, if the outcomes, if you list the outcomes, 1 to 5, and you have 5 people doing the same, and you realize that this can be done by 1 person and achieve the same outcomes, automatically you can do with 1 person. So that's what we are saying. As you manage these parastatals, can we then manage the process in a way that people don't lose their jobs and the things I said? The other important point, which I said earlier, is that the reason why these parastatals have been dissolved or merged is to improve efficiency. In any area where you improve efficiency, it means you improve the outcomes. Because inefficiencies don't give you the best outcomes. So where you are saying we have inefficiencies in some parastatals, and this has been confirmed through research, what we call evidence-informed research.
Abrupt dissolution is not addressing the efficiency.
What you need to care about is, if I dissolve this parastatal, I don't lose anything in terms of outcomes. In that case, what do I do with the employees who are there? And then if you have alternative for the employees, that is not managing the process. Now, the issue which Susan was talking about, I want to come to that. The issue of importation, for me, is basically a very simple thing. If you look at the principle of comparative advantage, you could be better as a country to import sugar than grow sugar in Kenya, if you analyze the cost of production. So we need to ask ourselves, even as we claim that we are now producing sugar in Kenya and we are not importing, at what cost? Because you go to our neighbors here, Southern Sudan and the Sudan itself, sugar would be produced at a very low cost to an extent that even if you imported, you get cheaper sugar in Kenya without anything happening. What is happening is, because of corruption, we bought sugar cheaply, we factor in corruption in, by the time it gets here, it's more expensive than Numia sugar. Can you do away with the corruption and then you get cheaper sugar, either from Sudan or Brazil, so that we enjoy competitive advantage in terms of production?
Okay.
Instead of collapsing,
then I come to Brian.
Let me respond.
Yes.
You know, he's mentioning a few parastatals. What he has not given is the derivative factor that informs the collapsing of those parastatals. Cost Development Authority, what does it do? He doesn't know. What is the derivative effect? He won't say. And why is it being collapsed? He won't say. Why in the first place was it established? He won't say. Cost Development Authority, I serve there. I know what it does. There are things that it does which the government won't do. For instance, when you create Cost Development Authority, you attract more funding from funding institutions for specific purposes, where then the negotiation is at the local level. When you put it to the ministry, and I want to correct that, it is not true that if you collapse Cost Development Authority and take it to the ministry of regional development or whatever ministry it is, then it means you can still discharge the same function that Cost Development Authority is discharged, because the offices, the Office of Cost Development Authority are at the cost. The interactive processes of Cost Development Authority in the specialized function, in terms of buying boats for the fishermen, in terms of putting coolers for the fishermen, in terms of all that, will not be done by the ministry. We know the problem, and what we call it in law is you cannot approbate and reprobate. You cannot take by one hand and pretend.
I want to cut you short. Yes. We take a short break. You'll finish on that, then I'll come to you both. Let's take a short break. And welcome back to Good Morning Kenya. You're watching The Viewpoint, and the debate here is getting heated. And before we enter on a break, you're making a point. I want to take a minute and finish on that so that he can respond, and then we go to Mr. Sosion.
Just 3 issues.
Yes.
The principle of governance is that you can't approbate and reprobate, meaning you can't take and then give and pretend that you are creating an equilibrium or a balance of sorts. Obviously, there are repercussions, and those repercussions are not what we've been explained. One is labor, and two is the development traction that we've had. When we were off air, I was trying to tell my good friend here, even with its own problems, what Coast Development Authority has been able to do to the people of the coast. But he differs and says the theorizing of research is that it is useless. I mean, it is not useless. It has worked for the people, and people have been employed there, and there will be implication for all the projects that have been done. There's much Dam. I can explain to him the projects that are ongoing, and specifically because there's a direction and a specialized unit of a parastatal that has put into place. The second issue is the tragedy of commons. Tragedy of commons in law means that which belongs to all belongs to none. Because it belongs in government, there's wanton expendable resources on account of officialdom and decision making. When you are in officialdom, you take that which belongs to all, meaning government property, as you know, with nonchalance. Whereas if it is yours, you administer on it because it is personal. And we see all this decision making because we are told Parliament has discussed it. We are told Cabinet has discussed it. Those are not the best brains, definitely. Number two is decision making by those people at the highest level obviously have also been checked to be wrong many a times. Obviously, that's where we are, because we have this economy. We have the economy where it is because of decision making of such people. And then the fact that the Cabinet has said parastatal must be dissolved doesn't mean it is right. And by the way, I do know that we will be in court very soon. I know that for a fact.
All right.
To check on this. And these excesses were, for instance, if a parastatal was put into place, like my good friend has said here, for purposes of addressing marginalization, has marginalization therefore ceased, like at the coast? Has marginalization therefore ceased such that you do not want to enhance development in the measure and in the facet of Coast Development Authority as was then? So my take would be this. Of course, there's no wrong and right answer here, because you see the differing opinions could be opinions to the extent of where people have been brought up, where they've lived, where their bread is buttered. But the point remains that I think at all circumstances, a decision like this has some effect on certain people and certain sectors.
All right, respond.
First of all, I want to thank Bonakiti for waxing lyrical. Of course, he's an advocate. You know, they have a knack for words. I do not disagree with much of what you've said, but to recapitulate, if the government wants to address loss in parastatals, they should focus on reforms, not abrupt dissolutions. There are a number of things that can be done instead of just abruptly dissolving a parastatal. We can start with performance audits. Identify what is the problem. Where is it coming from? What is the cause of these losses? We can go to number two, restructuring. Replace those ineffective leadership and those ineffective workers with effective people. We can also go to revenue diversification, adapt business models to generate more income. There's a whole lot of things we can do before just abruptly dissolving a parastatal. And that is why I'm perplexed by all this. Have we tried these other things before really dissolving these parastatals? And you're dissolving them abruptly. That's why I'm calling them abruptly, because you haven't tried anything else. That seems to be something that everybody is avoiding. We can try, for example, I was giving an example to my friend Bonakith here. If you have your vehicle and it has problems, do you throw it away? You fix that vehicle. Now we have a parastatal that is bringing in losses. Find the root causes of those losses and fix them.
All right. You wanted to respond?
You know,
it's
very important that we are armed with facts. You know, when you're not armed with facts and data, you can't argue right. And the issue of parastatals merging, it did not originate from the mind of the president. I would like to dispel that. It is a matter that has been discussed in government widely, and not today, but for a long time. Makali Muli can confirm. It has been discussed in Parliament several, and the law has been passed for the same. And the president signed it into law. Everyone was quiet about it. And I urge my colleagues and any Kenyan, it is important you do research first, try to get to know what has been done, the processes which were followed, because a lot of technical analysis were carried out. Even the job losses also were analyzed, and protection of jobs were also taken into consideration. That is, if we go into that space. And let us not just talk for the sake of talking. Let's look at, for example, what is being merged. I'm giving example. Yeah. Tourism Promotion Fund and Tourism Fund. Yes. Tourism Promotion Fund and Tourism Fund. What is the difference? The second example, Commission for University Education being merged with Technical and Vocational Education and Training Authority and being merged with Kenya National Qualifications Authority. They do more or less the same thing. Why do you have different parastotals? The other third example is Kenya Rural Roads Authority and Kenya Urban Roads Authority. It is all roads. They are being merged as well. And you know, these are technical analyses that have been undertaken institution by institution, parastatal by parastatal. And by the time they're lumped together, there is always technical data that enables it, and that is so compelling for such an action to be taken. The Water Service Regulatory Board, Water Regulatory Authority. I want you to listen to that. Water Service Regulatory Board, Water Regulatory Authority. Regional Center on Groundwater Resources Education, Training and Research. Now, when all those are being lumped, you can see the genetic coding of these parastatals are one and the same. And lumping them together for purposes of government efficiency is important. And we are not beginning to debate it in this show. It has been debated in Parliament. A lot of work has gone into it. Okay. We cannot bastardize it since you are not informed and you are not in that space. That you come in now too late in the day and you put in your mind without even studying and understanding. It has got nothing to do with leadership of the president. Cabinet has a duty to carry out due execution of papers, memos that are submitted to them by line ministries. And cabinet is chaired by the president, and these decisions are taken. So it doesn't have to look like, oh, let us hang it on the president and do a very simple thing of, oh, job losses. I come from the background of labor, and I know what it means for job losses. And I know what is done to codify and protect the rights of workers in case of such a transition. That's a simple business. And in fact, my learned friend here should be telling me what the lawyers are doing to protect and ensure the safety of the workers in these entities.
Of course, we'll go to court. Of course, we'll go to court.
All right.
So these are facts. So I don't think...
I think everybody has made enough
points. And very brief one. The other one, which is important, the people must also note, is the issue of conflict between what some of these parastatals are doing and what the county governments are doing. Because, you know, government, some of the functions are devolved. So you find some parastatals actually carrying out
functions. Let the government address the losses.
So these are some of the conflicts.
Let the government address the losses that are being made by those parastatals.
All right, let's close in on that matter and move on to another.
Can I close it? Can I
30
close
seconds,
it?
please.
Yes.
30 seconds.
I think what Mr. Sonia has said is right. Let me give him credit. He's right when he talks of collapsing. I participated in the drafting of the Tourism Act, by the way. And we had that debate as to tourism fund and tourism. So he's right. We insisted at the drafting level that there should be a merger of those two functions. It wasn't now, apparently it has come to time. So collapsing them and merging them is okay. What he has addressed and what my good friend has not addressed completely is when you say, let's do away with these parastatals. I mean, that's the third tier, of course, of what the reforms that are being made in parastatals. They have shied away from addressing that issue because it doesn't make sense.
Okay. Let's close that matter at that point. Now, the Standard, the story that is addressed on the Standard is chaos unleashed as Americans celebrated the inauguration of the 47th president. The world was left in shock and is yet to recover after Donald Trump issued 26 executive orders, 12 memoranda and 4 proclamations that will drastically change the lives and upset the world order. That story is told on page 3 throughout to page 7 of the Standard. Some of the executive orders include Trump directs U.S. withdrawal from Paris Climate Agreement, a move that will see serious a move with serious environmental consequences, and also signed an executive order to withdraw the U.S. from the World Health Organization. Let me start with you, Brian. Yes. What do you make of this, and how is this going to affect the move from the U.S. move from the World Health Organization? How is that going to shape the recent?
It's a good thing that is happening to African countries, because we have this mentality that we are to be helped. Mm-hmm. That's the mentality that Africa leaders always have. We have to be helped. Now the training wheels are off. Mm-hmm. We'll learn to ride on our own. It will be hard at first, but at least it's going to lead to a good ending. The United States is a sovereign state. Mm-hmm. It is a sovereign state. It can do with its money what it pleases. And if it chooses to put itself first, then in all soberness of mind and in all wisdom, unless then now I am a beggar, I cannot start feeling bad for that. It is a good thing. It is a step in the right direction for us African countries. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Mheshimiwa Sosion, the move to remove the U.S. from the World Health Organization, how does it augur, especially for countries like Kenya?
First of all, what are the justifications? I saw arguments of Trump that the U.S. is putting $5 billion, and the population of the U.S. is 300 million, while China is putting $500 million, and the population of China is 1.5 billion. And so this is imbalance. It's unfair. I think the argument of Trump is that there should be equitable support to the World Health Organization, and that there is then need for the U.S. to discontinue funding the World Health Organization. It cannot only be the burden of the U.S. Other equal economies should also be able to do so. I think if you follow what the philosophy of Trump politics is, that America becomes the priority. And that means his administration will reduce involvement in activities on the world stage and focus on the interest of the Americans. If you looked at it, he said, we are going to tax outsiders and lessen the burden of taxes of the Americans. That means they are going to make money out there. So really, these are radical shift. And if you look at what is pronouncing, is very well supported by many Americans. So I don't know the equilibrium where it will eventually settle and the effects it will have in the global geopolitical and economic space. Definitely, many programs that have relied on the funding of the U.S. government will get affected in the security, in the economy, in the health sector. Definitely, yes. I am not sure how the strength of the dollar vis-a-vis our currencies will happen. We might have the power of the dollar going up against our other currencies. So really, the Trump presidency portends a lot of economic disruption and political disruption and programs disruptions globally. And the global community must prepare for it. And there's nothing you can do. That is a sovereign state, the United States of America.
Yes.
They can choose to get involved or not get involved. What is the lesson for Africa? There's been a big agenda of strengthening intra-Africa trade and political unity within the continent and removing barriers of movement of people and expanding our own market. We can trade within ourselves and do very well. So then this is not an item that a single country like Kenya or a single country like, we must think now regionally. Why do we have boundaries in Africa and visas and restrictions of movement? I think it is time we get rid of this, connect Africa through infrastructure, and we have a more federated continent politically, and probably think of our own single currency. We have our own resources. Let's think about Africa Vision 2063. If implemented, then it's a very good insurance against shocks of administrations like what you have seen, the one of Trump and other. We cannot over-rely on donations and funding from outside the continent. Are we able also, as a continent, to run our own health system and fund our own health programs and conduct our own research? We have our own scientists. Take, for example, Kenya in the livestock industry. We have never imported vaccine from outside Kenya. All our vaccine are developed by our own experts at Kenya Veterinary Kevevapi here in Kapete for our livestock. We have the knowledge, we have the capacity. We have to turn it around. We need revolutionary leadership that can package this data and organize the continent to be able to endure the shocks of certain shifts of what we are witnessing globally. And I think it is time for us to think hard and think outside the box, and stop this type of local, small, little petty arguments, and think big about humanity in this continent and the world. Because there is nothing we can do with America. Yes. They will do what they want.
In a statement,
and they have the power.
The World Health Organization also said they hope the U.S. will reconsider their position on this and also engage in constructive dialogue. Is there a chance that should that space for dialogue be provided, that the U.S. will walk back on this decision?
I think what we need to realize is when Trump was campaigning, his clarion call was "Make America Great Again."
Yeah.
And he did explain to Americans what it will take to make America great again by presenting his proposals. And it's on the basis of that the Americans voted for him. So he has the power of the people to do what he's doing. And to me, what we need to realize, the rest of the world, is that we have a new sheriff in town. So always coming with these proposals which are supported by the Americans. So to me, the short of it is that people must adjust to the new administration because they will come up with their proposals which are full backing of the Americans because he was voted in as a president. The issue of WHO is a very sensitive matter because it touches on the health of everyone in the world. And the president has pronounced himself to what he intends to do, withdraw. I'm sure that must be informed by a number of, possibly they must have done their own research and found that this is not benefiting the Americans. Or the Americans are losing more by being a member than they are gaining. But I think, as you are saying, because we also have other powers in the world like China, UK, and all the rest, maybe through diplomacy, they could be able to talk to the new president and see that he can reconsider. Personally, I would push for reconsideration because WHO does some things which cannot be done by another organization. For example, setting standards, the health standards in the world. Also, in case of emergencies like disease outbreak, the way they come in and make sure there is world order in that area is also very important. So I don't know whether by America being not there and being the superpower, whether it will then impact the way they will do their business. But if that is the case, they need to reconsider. But all said and done, Americans have a new president who has his own manifesto to implement. I think it's time he also be allowed to invest his manifesto. Yes.
Wakili, what do you think of this? And does it mean that henceforth anything that is to do with social aid that is beneficial to the U.S. is likely to be cut off?
Yes, definitely has been an impact. That's an administrative decision that he makes in the US, but obviously it has an impact globally. You'd say Trump's pursuit in terms of administration is towards anti-globalization. Because that which moves to unify the world as a unit, common purpose of humanity, so that then decisions are made for the human person. For instance, if you come to the Paris Convention, matters environment, environment belongs to all of us. Actually, pollution in an industrial country like China affects the whole world. And then, of course, the disorganization of the world in terms of world temperatures and world patterns, weather patterns and climate, obviously affects everyone. So we are at a globalized environment. However, you need to balance what you do to the global arena and also locally. When it means you sacrifice more for the greater good of the globe, I don't think that's justified. When you sacrifice for the greater good of the globe so that then eventually the net effect is that it comes back to you, that's good. But in the short term, I think you must locally address the issues that you want. And those decisions have to be made in one way or another if it means giving your people better lives. We are collapsing parastatals here. He's collapsing funding to the global scene. And those are decisions that are local and informed by the environment that we package ourselves in. However, and most importantly, I don't think these decisions should be looked at in that prism alone. What US as a policy has been accusing WHO is that it was China-centric. Meaning, therefore, especially during the COVID pandemic, most of the issues that was accusing of China, because they wanted WHO, of course, to accuse China that it was the source of the virus and all that. And of course, China was disputing that. But that was, in fact, at a point, it was seen to be a biological warfare of some sort. But I think the grievances that need to be addressed to the US in as far as WHO is concerned in the interactive global environment for purpose of placating it to continue, because you can't force US, right? You need then to address the issues that US has, because why is Trump pulling out? Yes, he wants to address issues at the local scene, but those issues are already being addressed through and through. It doesn't mean that US collapses because it is funding WHO. It's because there are issues that need to be addressed. So I do think there is space for dialogue. And probably what Trump is doing is then pulling a card so that then WHO can sit on the table, which is willing, as we speak, to be able to address issues of China centrism as opposed to American centrism. And of course, that is also in the packaging that America comes first. The other issue will be the effect, net effect on Africa. You know what? Africa will be affected either way. There's nothing good that can be done up there that won't affect you negatively. A lot of WHO, of course, has done a lot of its research in terms of drugs and vaccines and whatever in Africa, because the environment in Africa, one, is good because it's not highly regulated. And about the ethical issues are lesser in Africa for both testing vaccines and all that. Then natural resources are more available in Africa than in other places, and so on and so forth. But you realize also that Africa bears the brunt of the effects of WHO again, because, we have managed to eradicate certain diseases on account of efforts of WHO. Polio has been reduced and all that. Some of these vaccines, measles and stuff like that, obviously is the effort of WHO. But eventually, I do think that Africa, on a balance of the equilibrium, Africa needs WHO more than US does. Because basically what US is doing is not only funding.
What Africa needs is a change in thinking.
Okay, let me finish.
Yes, it's that US, now that US is funding the globe through WHO in matters of health, it means it can fund itself, right? So it means Africa, in the context of funding of US, is also get funded by US. So Africa needs US to fund, and WHO needs US to fund, and Africa basically needs to wake up, because there's AU, what has it done in terms of matters of health? It's still waiting for the same WHO to be able to be reorganized and organized. So I do think that it's a wake-up call. It should be a wake-up call for the country. It should be a wake-up for every country in Africa and for Africa, that we need to be on our own. So there's an element of African-centric decisions that have to be made, as opposed to relying on the general globe, because the general globe may care, but oftentimes may not care about Africa.
I concur with Bonakith. It is a global world we are living in. We are all interconnected. But it is high time we as Africans started to thoroughly solve our own problems. We are not deformed, or We are not, we are not weak in thinking. We have to change our thinking. We have to change and revolutionize our strategies. And we have to put our mindset in such a way whereby if foreign nations, foreign sovereign nations decide to pull out of institutions like World Health Organization, it does not cause a panic like the one I'm witnessing here with my friend. That is something we should take this as a learning lesson and never be in such a position again. And that has to happen, and it has to happen with shifts and radical thinking from the sweeper to the presidents to the leaders of this great continent. We have to stop thinking that we need to be helped. Africa right now reminds me of that broke relative, you understand, who really seems always, we always have to help them. Within the family setup, you know, I don't know which family setups you come to, but it's most family setups, there's always somebody you always need to help. We have to get up from that position. And it's also about dignity. We have to yes, we're in the global platform, but what do they see us? Do you know how many representatives we have in the UN? We don't even have one African country in the permanent, is it permanent seats? We don't. So any major decision is being made for us. And for us to prove and show and prove ourselves, it has to start now. And this has to serve as a wake-up call so that we don't panic again in such situations. Africa needs to really wake up. Whatever we are going to go through right now, yes, it's going to be hard, but we're going to take it in stride, and we need to solve our own problems, put down the barriers, and come together as one and address the globe as one. Otherwise, we'll always be in this condition whereby now you are a child. If your parents divorce, you have a problem. We are just relying on the rest of the world. If you're not relying on America, then we are relying on China. Okay. If they are fighting, we have problems. That's not any way to live for any human being. It lacks dignity. All right.
There's something I need us to talk about, and it's about proposal by the new KRA chair, that is Nderitu Muriithi, scrapping the annual finance bill to enhance tax predictability for business, and instead advocates for multi-year tax policy for stability. Is this the right move, Bwana Zazia?
Well, it may be too early for us to comment, but we need to understand what it is, and you understand the reason why many Kenyans rose against the finance bill. The finance bill is basically a revenue collection strategic measure. We are running a budget of 4.3 trillion. And from the budget, we could raise, from the finance bill, we could raise 2.1 trillion. And the finance bill has been reviewed annually to enhance revenue collection. And it has not been very friendly, and probably that has affected the stability of businesses. And if KRA can come up with a more predictable and strategic measure that will still see collection of adequate revenue to finance the budget, and then that will be good. Yeah, if it works, then it is right. You know, we cannot tie the hands of the chair once he's in office from developing the measures, revenue collection measures that work. All what is needed is revenue, adequate revenue to be collected. And for us to run an economy that we are not going to borrow, you know, we have relied on borrowing. And the projection is that for us to finance our budget in the short term, we should be able to raise revenue up to 5 trillion. And to stretch our economy to be able to do that, a lot needs to be done. So thinking outside the box and what the chairman is proposing should be given serious attention, so that if it works, then it is fine, and Parliament will find it easier. If that can give assurance of collection of revenue to finance budgets, then so be it. So to me, we cannot block new ideas, and we cannot rubbish the new ideas until it is proved to us that it works. this is, as a country, that is how we do things. And by the time that bills come up, it will go through public participation, it will go through parliament, it will go through a problem or a process of technical analysis. So for me, I believe in a country that is free, that can raise its own revenue to finance its budget and program without over-relying on outsiders. And let us not forget, during Kibaki administration, and he told us, even as teachers, and that is how we agreed to support and vote for Kibaki. And this is one president who was voted when he was sick and almost unconscious, but was elected by the country because he had given us measures that would work. And he said, I'll see no loopholes of corruption in collection of revenue, and I'll collect enough revenue to finance our budget and to finance free education from primary 1 to 8 and to pay teachers pending salaries, which actually did. And the revenue collection measures that Kibaki instituted saw our budget financed domestically at 95%. And your friends, which my fellow has been talking about here, the World Bank, was surprised that we are not going to borrow, we are not borrowing their money because they wanted us to borrow their money. They're in business of interest, and that we are financing our budget at 95%. For us to really be free as a country, let's raise our own revenue, finance our budget, run our programs. And that is what the entire continent needs. We don't need to be externally dependent. So what carried us, because it is established by law to do that work and to collect revenue, if that can be done and we still ensure stability of businesses, then it's a good thing. And that's a good equilibrium that we can attain for an economy that works.
Okay, Honorable Makali, does it mean, let's say hypothetically this in a way comes into fruition, does it mean that government should be giving a 5-year kind of finance bill that matches its manifesto?
Okay, I think the most important question is what is the work of a finance bill? What it does, it enables the government to be able to finance the budget. So we do our budgets on an annual basis. Every year you come up with a budget. Then the finance bill determines where do you get the resources to finance your budget. So I think what the chairman is saying that if we had a finance bill which could be catering for about 2 to 3 years instead of annual, then it will help the country in terms of businesses can be able to predict what their taxation levels are going to be in terms of now as they factor in their costs. And be more stable in terms of planning. But all said and done, that's a very good idea. But I think there are also areas which we need to consider, because if we are doing our budget on an annual basis, and then we fix the finance bill for 2 or 3 years, then does it mean we also have a budget which takes care of 3 years? Because immediately you change the budget, then automatically you need to change the finance bill. Unless you are saying whatever excess will be coming from it, then we borrow. And we know the challenges of borrowing. Or we come up with a time of saying whatever extra resources are required, we could get them through A in A. That is a provision in aid. So to me, there are some basic questions to ask ourselves. But it's a very good idea from a business perspective, that when I'm doing my accounts, I can do my accounts and know that in the next 3 years, I'm not likely to change my account because of new tax requirements and all that. But practically, I think it could face some challenges. But it would be a very interesting national conversation for people who are in the finance and economics.
Yes. What do you think of that idea, and what could be the biggest challenge to implement this?
First, it is not wrong to suggest the longevity of budgeting cycle to be increased, and that's elasticity be tested further from 1 year to further time, for the reason that I think the problem we've had, to be honest, is Parliament. You know, prediction is what attracts economic investment. A DFI direct foreign investor who comes to the country and wants to put up a plant would want to basically to plan the incomes, the expenditures, vis-a-vis the profits that is going to make over a period of time. That gets interrupted at every cycle of 5 years on account of the budgetary process. Obviously, the executive will want to milk as much as possible. And we know it. Nobody comes to government with his own money. So you want to collect as much as possible because you have a manifesto to complete and in a hurry, because after a 5-year cycle, look, you have to go back to elections. But then we have parliament that's a checker for the people. It has been very disruptive in the model of budgeting as we've seen it, until people go to protest. Well, people went to protest because parliament did its worst. You see, to protect the people, one of it is also to make the expectations in terms of the economic factors predictable. So when I plan today that I'm going to buy a car, so I'm going to pay these installments, and in 3 years, 5 years, I have finished. It's a matatu. But then you come and change the factors such that the interest rates go higher. If it is a payslip that I'm using for purposes of deploying resources to finance the installments, you disrupt it. So that where I had a balance of 8,000 in my payslip, it becomes 2,000 because we've depleted it to, say, fund some housing, some fund NSSF, fund this. You are abusing the liberty given to you because the inconsistency disrupts my planning in terms of the economy. We are where we are because Parliament honestly has failed us. I have said here, and I repeat, Parliament is the weakest link we have in this country.
Okay.
But let me say this. When you are predictable in terms of the longevity of the budgeting cycle, what you give is the stability in planning. Planning is everything for good economic stability. So planning is informed by the expectations of the disruptions within the expenditures that are official, because it's coercive. You see, taxing and payment of tax to government is coercive, because if you don't do it, there will be implications and repercussions. You can avoid by not doing that which will attract the taxation, and that's called tax avoidance. Because then, if I have to buy a matatu, I'll pay fuel levy, I will do this, I'll do this. Of course, other unofficial taxes such as COPS will be there and so on and so forth. But the point is that if you give me a proper planning for the 5 years, I'll say for 3 years or 5 years, I will say within that period of time, my predictability is that my pay slip will remain with this amount, I'll be able to afford education for my children, and so on and so forth. That's municipal, that's local. Internationally also, we probably will have a better environment for purposes of allowing investors to plan much better than the disruptive environment that we always experience year in, year out. And who said every budget cycle we must disrupt the taxation process that we always add? I mean, that's the norm of Parliament. The thinking is, for every budget cycle we keep on adding or disrupting the tax regimes. We actually can leave it static. We did it. Let me explain this lastly. We did it because the finance bill, or the finance bill rather, because it never became too law. The president returned it, and he said he's going to sign it because of the protests. And it means, therefore, there was no intervening tax act that disrupted the former. Which means, therefore, it is possible for purposes of increasing the period of time within which we can have our tax cycle, so that there's stability and prediction.
I want you to give I want you to respond to this, and also, in the interest of time, you give your closing remarks. We are behind time.
Bonamark, thanks a lot. I'm going to call it as it is. Whatever the KRA is trying to do right now, whatever the government is trying to do right now, they're just trying to be cautious. Once bitten, twice shy. They saw what happened with the finance bill, so they're trying to have a different approach. But the best approach is for the government holistically to review how it collects the taxes. We spoke about Bwana Kibaki. Bwana Kibaki also took loans. You understand? And being a deficit economy does not allow you now to misuse how you're going to take taxes, because US has been a deficit economy since the 30s. You just have to get the loans, make sure you expand infrastructure and expand tax base. In that, expand the number of taxpayers. Do not increase the individual tax on people, like what Bonakith is saying. So the government has to change its approach and how it collects its taxes.
All right. I'm told we are out of time, so I'll Thank you. Adesala Makali Mulu, MP Kitui Central, and Honorable Sosion and Brian Oduo, a political analyst, and Wakili George Keith. This is where we end the viewpoint here